Special Agent Jones' investigation was moving beyond the autopsy and crime scene to bore in on just who this couple, Justine and Eric, really was. The strange stories he was starting to gather would turn out to be as important as any lab results.
You had a mystery to solve.
It was a mystery. It was.
At the close of the Christmas holidays, 2 years before her sudden death, Justine returned to Emerald Hill Elementary. On her finger, that diamond engagement ring she'd fought so hard for from the man she loved and dated for 6 long years.
What are people thinking?
Everybody's going, well, is she really going to marry him? Is he really going to marry her? And some of it was like, well, finally came to his senses. He saw what a precious person she is.
Eric, by now, had left his store manager job at Lowe's and was getting ready to start a construction business. To Justine, his new venture in their marriage would be the beginning of the life she dreamed of since she was a little girl. A husband, a house in the country, and a baby. To her friends, it was a disaster waiting to happen.
Consensus was that Eric was not the guy for her.
They didn't seem to match. She was a very sweet young thing that taught kindergarten, and he was Mr. Tough Guy. So where's the match? You know, it's like you have to have some cross ties to connect. And I never could see what the cross ties, what was the connection.
Still, Pat and Kathleen, her teacher friends, came around.
We planned a really nice shower, and we were excited, and she wasn't.
She wasn't?
No.
Pat hosted the shower with all the crepe paper and ribbon you'd expect from fellow kindergarten teachers. But Justine's gloom never lifted. Perhaps it was just a bad case of bridal jitters.
She didn't seem very happy. The whole time during the shower, I wanted to get her aside and say, you don't have to marry this person. But that conversation didn't happen.
Justine's mom, meanwhile, was fearful her daughter was heading into a train wreck of a marriage. The May wedding was 2 weeks away. They'd booked a charming bed and breakfast in the rolling hills of the Virginia countryside. But Justine was the polar opposite of a bridezilla. She hadn't picked up her dress, ordered the cake, or finished sending out invitations.
I just didn't feel right. Part of me was concerned, because I'd heard for years about Eric's opposition to get married, that she was going to get left standing at the altar. You know, that he was going to get cold feet, and there'd be 100 people there, and her in her pretty white dress, and he just wouldn't show up. And obviously, if you think that's a possibility, you want to protect your child.
Heidi and Steve got in the car and drove to Virginia, a surprise intervention of sorts. It turned out poorly.
Heidi, what did you see in her?
Oh my God, just blind rage.
Really?
Oh my God, yeah. She stormed into this hotel room and I've never heard her talk to anybody like that. She just screamed at me and called me names and, you know, said she hated me and she would never, ever, ever forgive me for intruding on her life. I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked.
You're seeing your daughter come unglued right before your eyes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Was Eric the elephant in the room? This whole confrontation?
Yeah. At one point in the conversation, before she had calmed down, she said something to the effect of, "Do you understand how hard you have made things for me by coming up here?" That stuck in my mind. What did she mean by that?
Maybe she was telling her parents to back off, that she'd come of age. She was, after all, 27, a woman with a profession she loved, and her decisions from here on out would be her own.
We'd pushed as far as we could, and so now the only strategy available to us was the opposite. Let's have the wedding, let's make it as nice as we can, let's make it as enjoyable as we can, and that's exactly what we tried to do.
And they pulled out all the stops. The beautiful ceremony went off without a hitch. Sister Lauren, the maid of honor. There was dancing and even a private chef picked out by Heidi. A picture-perfect May Day in a charming setting.
And it looks like weddings in 100,000 different family albums.
Yep.
That's what it looked like.
There was a lack of joy. Mostly I would say that was it. There was a lack of joy. It was like you're going through perfunctory motions. And it's like, wow. It was just very strange.
The bride posing with her new husband would be dead in 5 months' time. Some of the guests would never see Justine alive again. The day after taking his vows, Eric took off on his motorcycle.
He left the next day and he never came back. He didn't continue to stay at the bed and breakfast with her.
He wasn't there for the gathering for the opening of wedding presents. Justine saw her family off alone.
We never saw him again.
Stranger still, Holly, Justine's closest sister's college roommate, wasn't even told that there had been a wedding.
I didn't know she was getting married. She didn't send me an invitation.
You're her best friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But maybe not so surprising, since Holly had never made much of a secret of her dislike for Eric.
I honestly hated him from the first second I saw him.
Holly, really?
Despise. Really, I mean, just gut instinct. I felt sick. I felt nauseous.
To be in his presence?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
What was there in your radar that had made that decision about him so quickly?
I didn't like the way he looked at her. I didn't like the way he kind of treated her, and he just kind of acted like he was better than she was, and I just didn't see him ever valuing her.
From the moment Justine met Eric, Holly thought her friend was taking a slow-motion tumble into an abyss. This dear friend from their beautiful private women's college, nice homes and solid upbringing with a loving family, was now living in a dreary little cinder block house.
She was living in a world that was so different from the world that essentially, you know, we came from. It wasn't even really reality.
And to Eric's cousin Tracy, that was all part of the problem. In her opinion, Justine's friends and family flat out didn't think Eric was good enough for her.
I just think that from the beginning they didn't approve of Eric, and I think
And
it probably...
as you remember, that was really the source of all that kind of anxiety at the wedding.
Yes.
The simple fact was, she says, this was a guy and a girl in love, newlyweds.
Whenever I would see them together, they always seemed happy.
The couple was even looking at buying a big piece of land in the country. Eric was planning to build his new bride a fine new house. And Justine, all morose and mopey, not in August, only 3 months before she died, when cousin Tracy snapped this picture of the couple at her brother's wedding. The whole big Abshire family had embraced Eric's bride, she says, and made her feel welcome.
They had a great time. Justine and Eric really had a good time at the reception.
Agent Jones sifted through these stories told about a couple whose days had ended on this road. Eric, her husband, cradling her body while investigators started the long search for answers.
We were starting to determine that, okay, she's an accomplished teacher during her daytime, and then she has a separate life, and the two hardly mixed.
And investigators needed to know exactly how Justine had spent her final day.
Something was totally wrong.
What do you think was going on with her as you look back? She was a wreck, huh?
Yeah, she was.
Coming up, was Justine afraid for her life?
She had been crying. She had been crying uncontrollably. She had told me, if I'm not at school, if I'm not here, this is where you can find my lesson plans.
When Shattered continues.